Good evening, everyone. My name is Maria. I'm part of Two Desperados and Serbian Games Association. Tonight, I'm going to be your host here. And before I introduce our guest, I would like to share something with you. I'm a huge fan of casual games, like obviously. And from the moment I used the slingshot for the first time, to throw a wingless bird into the bunch of hungry green piggies, I was instantly drawn into this game. And from that moment, Angry Birds became my habit, literally. I spent a ridiculous amount of time playing this game. And many versions of this game.
Yeah, there are a few.
Yeah, in a couple of years that followed. So when I heard that a person who's involved in creating this franchise is going to be present here in Belgrade, I was delighted, personally. And people, please, let's welcome Mr. Peter Vesterbacka.
Hey, thank you. Yeah, I'm like equally delighted to be here. So I first have to admit that it's my first time here in Belgrade, first time in Serbia, but not the last. So it's been a great 4 days, and was kind of like thinking like what should I talk about? But yeah, probably like games because there's lots of people from the games side here. Maybe a bit about myself. So I actually started my career or like working life. I don't like this career like word too much, but I started actually at the original startup. So basically the company that Bill and Dave started in their garage in Palo Alto in California in 1939. And then I always have to stop here because there are like a few young people here that then, okay, 1939 before my time, so I'm not that old. But I was actually fortunate enough to meet with both Bill and Dave when they were still alive. So it was Bill Hewlett and Dave Packard. So the company they started, Hewlett Packard, and not only, they were fantastic entrepreneurs. So they didn't only start, HP the company, but they started the whole like Silicon Valley. So that's the birthplace of Silicon Valley. That's where it all started in 1939 in that actually tiny little garage. So if you go to Silicon Valley and you go to Palo Alto, the garage is still there. It's not like super impressive, but of course it is impressive if you think about like what started there. Obviously, fantastic company, and Silicon Valley, fantastic place. So I was working there many years, and again, so like a long time ago, but 1999, so a bit over 20 years ago, when I was working at HP, we started something called the HP Bazaar, and basically what had happened to HP, and I think this is actually a good lesson for all of us, that when you're like super successful as a company, and HP was super successful like in the 90s, selling all of these like client server systems to companies all over the place, and then they didn't like know this little thing called the internet and the web like happening, even though they were like smack in the middle of the action in Silicon Valley. And this happens to many companies, that when you're like super successful, you just keep doing what you've been doing like forever, and then you don't realize that the world is changing around you. So that actually was kind of like what was happening to HP. And I had been trying to convince the HP like corporate guys that, hey, you should look at what we're doing here in Finland, because what was happening in Finland same time was like the rise of like Nokia and mobility, mobile phones, like all of that. I actually tried to pitch already like in 1996 to Joel Birnbaum, who was leading HP Labs, and they had invented all kinds of like cool stuff. They were saying that, hey, we should do more, here in Finland, that you should look at this like mobile stuff that is happening, because what actually was happening, that it used to be that, working at HP, you always went to the US to find the solutions for the problems. But then with mobile, it was actually completely different, because in the US, they actually didn't have much to offer when it comes to mobile phones and mobile technology. Actually, I was told that, like, yeah, you guys in Finland, you might need mobile phones. But here in the US, we have pay phones everywhere. So, like, why would anybody want to carry a phone around? And this was not like even a joke. Of course, now they've changed their mind and they have iPhone and Android and all of that. But it's always good to remember that it wasn't always the case. And people were like seriously telling us that, okay, you don't need mobile phones. Okay, mobile phones back then were like a bit bigger and maybe you didn't want to buy or carry one of those around everywhere. But it was very clear where things were going. But anyway, so then so HP kind of like missed this whole internet thing, and there was back in the day there's this Sun Microsystems company, and they had very successful marketing and advertising campaign where they're saying that they're .com, and then when we were doing .com stuff, then okay, who do you call? Oh, there's this like Sun Microsystems, they like have something to do with it, so let's call those guys and get some servers, and then we're like in the .com business. So anyway, HP completely like missed that, and then what happened was that I was invited to, my boss at the time, I was doing like business development in Europe. My boss at the time was like on his summer vacation, and he said that, oh, there's like this strategy session in Palo Alto, so Peter, why don't you go there, because like I'm on my vacation, and okay, fine. And then we had this strategy session thinking about, okay, what should we do about this, how do we get back like in the game, and agreed that, okay, it's going to be all about services, and everything will become a service. Okay, this was like in 1999, so pretty early to talk about that. I mean, of course, now we take for granted that everything is a service. It's in the cloud, running there somewhere, but that was not at all like a given back then. But anyway, so we started talking about that everything will become, and we talked not about service, but e-services. So that became like the slogan and everything. And because I was from Finland, and with all these American guys said that, okay, yeah, it's going to be a service, but it's going to be like a mobile service. Everything will become mobile. And again, I heard that, oh, but yeah, pay phones. And then you always need a bit of luck. So what happened was that HP got a new CEO. So Carly Fiorina, she came from Lucent. And Lucent had done the exact same like mistake as HP, that they were busy selling all these like fixed networks and all of these like networking gear for that, and then mobile happened, and they were like totally out of the game, and they totally missed that. So then when Carly became CEO, it was very easy to pitch to her that, hey, we need to do something about this mobile thing, about this services thing, so why don't we do this mobile services activity. And then what was very important, I mean, what happened to HP was that, big corporation, and we all know that big corporations are not always the ones creating all these like cool new services. Actually, some might even, compare the corporations to dinosaurs, and, we all know what happened to those guys. They didn't win. Actually, what happened was that the small furry animals took over. And in my kind of like world, the smaller furry animals are the startups, the people who create the cool new services. So then what I proposed together with my team that, okay, let's start this HP Bazaar to attract all of these small furry animals. So, we get all the startups creating all of these cool new services to work with us, and then they'll use like this boring infrastructure provided by the HP. So we get cool new services, boring infrastructure, go. And we went after all these like mobile operators and these guys and the Nokias and the Ericssons and these guys of the world. And what we did with this HP Bazaar, and this is also like the way I like to do branding, all of our competitors, all these corporations, all of them were doing competence centers and, various like innovation centers and centers of excellence and like these super boring corporate things. So we decided to do things differently. So we called ourselves the HP Bazaar. And then, people always when I say, okay, I'm Peter and like I'm from the HP Bazaar, they were like, what? So what is this Bazaar? Is it like a marketing program, developer program, partnership program? Like, what is it? And I said, it's all of that and more. That's why we call it the Bazaar. And of course, what happened then was that all of our competitors who were running these like super boring competence centers, and centers of excellence and whatnot, all of those like came and went. So they basically died away after a while, and we kept going. So we did this Bazaar program for many years. So actually what we did in this HP Bazaar thing was that we created kind of like, you know, co-working spaces and all that before co-working. We did hackathons. Before hackathons, we did this, what we called bazaar camps. So we invited developers to spend 3 days, 2 nights together with us. We gave them, you know, laptops with all the tools. We gave them, actually, what I was particularly proud of was we gave developers sleeping bags that were branded that I sleep with HP. You know, obviously not approved by the corporations like, you know, PR people, but we did it anyway. And yeah, so then we basically invited developers to work with us, create all of these cool new services. We did this in Helsinki. We did this, we actually 1 year we took over the tennis court of the Shangri-La Hotel in Beijing. So we did like, you know, kind of like not a forced labor camp, but like a bazaar camp. So different for like China. But anyway, and then we did that like in Cannes on the beach and like in Singapore on top of Suntec Center, which is like one of the shopping centers there. And we managed to create like a pretty good buzz, and we worked with maybe, I don't know, 600 startups around the world. And we set up these physical sites, the first one in Helsinki. Then we ended up doing one in Singapore because Carly, the CEO, after we announced this October 1999, she went to Singapore, HP, biggest employer after the government in Singapore. So she met with the Prime Minister, and then a few days later I get this email that, oh, Carly met with you know, the Prime Minister, and they talked about this like bazaar thing, and apparently we have agreed to set up one in Singapore. So then, you know, on a plane in Singapore, set up this physical site in Singapore as well. Then we ended up doing this, we went back to Silicon Valley, so we set up this HP Bazaar site in Cupertino, then Toronto, London, Amsterdam, Milan, Beijing, Shanghai, Bangalore, and probably some other places that I forgot. But anyway, so we had these like physical spaces where, you know, developers would come work on like the latest and greatest technologies from HP, Nokia, you name it, and creating all kinds of like cool new services. One of the things that we did back then, we worked with a company called Yomi Media, and they were actually the guys who created the first ringtone service. Some of you might remember that that was like a thing, and that was actually the service that I demonstrated when we launched this HP Bazaar, that I actually downloaded a new ringtone to my Nokia phone, and then I put it to the microphone, and then I said that, okay, look at what I just did, I downloaded a new ringtone to my phone. And then there was like an elderly gentleman in the audience. I was like, hey, Peter, but yeah, that's like, you know, fine, but when are you going to talk about like the serious services? And I said, okay, that this is actually, you know, if you know the background, this is actually pretty serious. Because what happened with that, and this was a little bit like with the Americans telling me that payphones are a thing, that we packaged this, you know, the HP servers and the software to do this ringtone download service. And then we're pitching this to operator in Austria. They were called Connect One. I don't know what they're called now, but anyway, and then we're saying that this is, you know, like going to be huge. So you should also have this like ringtone service. And then they told us that, oh yeah, but like again, you guys in Finland, it's cold and dark, and you have nothing else to do. So, you know, ringtones, but not going to work in Austria like ever. So then we did this proposal to them that, okay, we will give you the whole thing for free, but we will take half. And they said like, yeah, great. So then we got the servers and everything up and running. I think it was like November that year. And of course, we all know that Christmas is like big in mobile. So the whole thing paid for itself in like 4 weeks. And we never ever did such a good deal like again, because the operator figured out that, hey, this is actually pretty big. And I think ringtones at some point were like bigger than the whole music industry. So it became pretty big. But yeah, so, and actually my boss at the time almost got fired, because then in the US they did these, you know, similar deals for people selling like dog food online. You remember all those .coms that were doing all kinds of crazy stuff. And those deals didn't turn out quite as well, because the market for dog food online wasn't like, you know, amazing. So, but anyway, so we were told not to do those kind of revenue share deals anymore. Yeah, but then what also kind of like happened back then is that in 2003, I organized a game-making competition, and that was the time when our friends at Nokia were still making phones, and they had come out with the first like smartphones, So, some of you might remember the legendary 7650, 3650, these smartphones with these tiny little color screens and stuff. And then we decided to do a game-making competition to create the best possible mobile multiplayer game. Okay, multiplayer because we at HP were interested in selling the servers to power these. And then 3 young guys from Aalto University, Niklas, Kim and Jarno, took part in this competition. And they won it. They actually created this game called King of the Cabbage World. And it never came out under that name because it was actually later published by our friends at Sumea, so Ilkka and the guys, became famous a bit later. But it's also a good example of like a tight community that everybody knows everybody in games in Finland and in startups in Finland in general. But anyway, so Niklas and the guys won this competition with this King of the Cabbage World game. And then after the competition, they came to me and like, okay, we're students here at Aalto and won the competition, like, now what? What should we do? And then I told them, and I always have the same advice, like everybody, that, you guys love playing games, but you love making games. So why don't you start a company to do what you love? So, why don't you start a company to make games? Like, how difficult can it be? So they started Rovio in 2003. And it turned out that it wasn't like that easy. And when you look back at 2003, maybe not the right time to start a games company and making mobile games. So it actually then took 6 years, 51 games. And then 10 years ago, actually almost exactly, because 11th of December, so like tomorrow, 10 years ago, the 52nd game came out, Angry Birds. So again, also a good example, like the Silicon Valley thing, that it's not like Silicon Valley got started by Google, Facebook, Twitter, one of those like newcomers, but it was started like all the way back in 1939. And the same thing like with Rovio and Angry Birds, that it wasn't like, okay, let's start a company, make games, boom, you have a hit. It actually was like 6 years and 51 games, and then 52nd game was Angry Birds. And I think that's good example of the fact that it typically takes a bit of time and a bit of effort to create these things. And anybody that will tell you that they know how to make hit games, don't invest. So it's very difficult, and it always involves a bit of luck as well. And actually, it's interesting when you look back, saying that, okay, maybe not the right time to start a mobile games company. But on the other hand, I mean, you learn by doing, you learn by making new games, and then, better, and like Angry Birds. If you look at other companies that got started roughly the same time, 2003, King got started in Stockholm in Sweden, and okay, now everybody knows King because of Candy Crush. But they started like very early, and then took a while, and okay, ended up with Activision and those guys. But yeah, not too bad. And then also a bit earlier, actually, so Ilkka that I mentioned, I met him first, probably like 99 or 2000 when they had started Sumea. So they started this company with a couple of his friends to make Java games for the first like Java phones that came out back then. So they made some puzzle games. And again, so they started very early. And of course now everybody knows Ilkka, not so much from Sumea, but from Supercell. That he launched like some years later after like Sumea became Digital Chocolate, and then Ilkka launched Supercell at Slush 2010, I think it was. And of course, Supercell then became the first decacorn out of Europe, so not like just a unicorn, but a decacorn worth 10 billion. So that's what Tencent paid, or the valuation for Supercell. So not too bad. And anyway, so they started very early. It wasn't like they started Supercell and like 10 billion happened. They had a bit of practice before. But yeah, so timing always is important. But the kind of like this golden rule of venture capital is that too early, too late. So you need to kind of get it just right. But it's super difficult. So but then with Angry Birds, so came out almost exactly 10 years ago. And it didn't become like a hit instantly. And also, like, let's say if you look at, always get asked that, okay, when do we know that it's going to become like a hit? I think that early indication was that it took like 8 months, which okay now doesn't seem like a long time. It took 8 months to develop the game, 12 people. But one reason why it took a bit longer than the other games was that the developers were playing the game like during development. So that's like, you know, pretty good indication. And we always had this rule at Rovio that we make games that we love to play ourselves. And I think this is something that is very important. And we all know that, with not only with games, but like companies, you can tell if they employ people that actually love what they do. You can see that in the products and the services. And I think that was very important, that you could see that and you can feel that in the Rovio games, that they're made by people who love what they do and they love the games that they make. I think this is super, super important. Anyway, so it wasn't, as I said, like it didn't take off immediately. Then maybe the strongest indication that we were onto something was that then Niklas went home for Christmas that year in 2009, and then kind of like, you know how it is always, you want to show your parents that, okay, this is, like what we've done. It starts when you're a young kid and, drawings and stuff, but then, games and things. So then, like you home and then, okay, like here is, like this latest game that we made, the 52nd one. And then typically what happened that then Niklas' mom has to look at the phone and, okay, very, very nice, and gets the phone back. But what happened with Angry Birds was different, because Niklas didn't get his phone back all Christmas, because his mom was playing the game. And okay, if you think 10 years back, I mean, now it's normal, all moms and all dads and everybody plays games, so that's like, so big deal. But 10 years ago, that was a big deal, because it wasn't normal for like non-gamers to play games. I mean, my mom playing games, I mean, like really, what is going on here? So we had like pretty good like indication that we're onto something, that hey, Niklas' mom plays game. And then we actually managed to become #1 in Finland, because we did word of mouth marketing, meaning that we told friends and family that, please download the game, and then, home of Nokia, not too many iPhones, #1. I don't remember how many hundreds of downloads, but like not many. And I think that this is also always good to kind of like keep in mind, that like kind of out of necessity, because we didn't have any money, so we couldn't like then, okay, and this is also before, like paid UA and like all of that, okay, let's just like spend $1 million or $2 million or $1 billion or whatever you happen to have, and then let's just like get lots of users on board. So that was, again, free to play and freemium models and all of that, so very different world. But anyway, we asked friends and family to download, and yeah, was good enough to get to #1 in Finland. And that was like the only way we could do that. Then we had tried to eliminate luck as a factor, like all the way through development, really analyzing, like hit games and what makes a hit game. Really try to understand. But as I said, nobody really knows how to make hit games. You just have to kind of like, it's a bit of trial and error. But then we actually got a bit of luck, because 2010, that was the Vancouver Winter Olympics. And then there's this very well-known Swedish skier, Anja Persson. She fell, hurt herself, couldn't participate. Then she was interviewed on Swedish TV, national TV. And of course, she was like, okay, it really sucks. Like I have to hang out here at the hotel. I can't take part in the games. And then, but luckily, there is this thing called Angry Birds, and like #1 in Sweden. So you need a bit of luck like that. But I think that always, it's like with good athletes that they're lucky, but might have something to do with the fact that they train a lot. So it's always you have to make your own luck. Yeah. But then anyway, so the game took off. Then Apple noticed there was something going on, featured Angry Birds in the UK, then in the US, went to #1, stayed there. And then at that time, I kind of like started telling everybody at Rovio, but also outside, that we're going to have 100 million downloads. And I was told, like, Peter, like, you're crazy, you're insane, it's impossible. Nobody has ever had 100 million downloads or anything. I mean, Tetris, that time had been around for 20 years, now 30. But 20 years of Tetris, not even Tetris has gotten to 100 million. So, like, it's impossible, like 100 million, crazy. And I remember there were flyers where, like Angry Birds, 500,000 downloads. And of course now it sounds crazy, but I mean, it was a big deal back then. So we have to remember that the market that we're looking at right now is totally different from what we had back then. So like even 500,000 was like big achievement. But anyway, so 100 million was like not going to happen. And then what happened was that the first 12 months of Angry Birds, we actually hit 50 million, which is like insane number. And I still remember when we were like celebrating that there was like an article about Angry Birds, I think in like the Sun, like tabloid in the UK, and we added like 40,000. Wow, that's like amazing, and all of this. So it's always good to like remember where you're coming from. But yeah, anyway, so 50 million downloads first 12 months, amazing number. And then what happened was Christmas again. So everybody got new iPhones, Android for Christmas, and we all know what happens. You get a new phone, you go there like App Store. Okay, what is number one? No, it's this like Redbird. Let's check it out. Boom, 25 million over Christmas. And then in March 2011, we actually hit the impossible 100 million. So it wasn't impossible. And then, like we ordered a few bottles of champagne, and then like cheers, back to work, finish way, no big emotional like thing, 100 million, no big deal, back to work. And then what was interesting that, okay, we were 12 people in the company when Angry Birds came out. We actually then grew very, very rapidly to 850. I mean, we acquired animation studios, we went into animation, consumer products, like everything. But the important kind of like thing there was that most of the people that joined the company were not there when like Angry Birds happened. And then when you ask them that, okay, so like what do you do at Rovio? Oh, we make games and then 100 million downloads happen. So we did like a new Angry Birds game, 100 million. New game, 100 million. It's just like, okay, it's what we do. And of course, getting to 100 million downloads is not easy. But it's actually easy when you know what you're doing. And so it just became like, that's what we do at Rovio. I mean, yeah, new game, 100 million. And we learned how to do that. So we did some pretty cool like marketing. I mean, we launched Angry Birds Space in space on the International Space Station. We had Dan Pettit, the astronaut who was there at the time. He actually built this real-life Angry Birds game on the space station. You can see the YouTube video still there. It's actually pretty cool. Actually, what was cool about that was that Dan Pettit, I mean, he's like an astronaut. I mean, astronauts are like super cool. But then he was telling us that his son thought that like super cool that you're working with the Angry Birds guys, being an astronaut, no big deal. But yeah, anyway, so that was pretty cool. But anyway, so he built this Angry Birds, live Angry Birds game on the space station, and Angry Birds Space, I mean, went to 100 million very quickly. Was also Angry Birds Space, also a good example of like how things happen. So back then, I think we were maybe 20 people in the company, and I was doing all the social media because I want to know like what our fans think, and I was replying to like every single tweet and like everything. And then one day we got a tweet from NASA, and they said that, okay, if you ever find pigs in space, they can help because apparently they're more compute power than back in 1969 when they put a man on the moon. So then I replied that yes, we should talk, and then I walked over to the coffee machine and I bumped into Petri Järvilehti, who was running our game studio at the time, and told Petri that, hey, I just got this tweet from the NASA guys, we should do something. And then like right there and then we just decided, okay, let's make Angry Birds Space. And yeah, we did, and then we launched it in space because that's what you do. And it was the first game to be launched in space, and became like pretty successful. But yeah, so the point here is we got used to launching new games and getting to 100 million. So it was like what we do. So then always when I asked that, okay, how did you make this Angry Birds, success story happen? I'll say that, yeah, like everybody, Rovio, we're like here in Finland, and everybody in Finland knows how to walk on water. So, like how difficult can it be? And of course, then you might ask like, okay, walking on water, that sounds like pretty difficult, like 100 million downloads. But it's not difficult when you know what you're doing. And actually, when you come to Finland, like right time of the year, it's very easy because it's frozen. So I think that this is something that is very important, that like many things in life, first you think it's impossible, like 100 million walking on water, but then you figure it out, it's very easy. And I think this is very, very important. So my experience, I mean, with Angry Birds and many other things, that there are very, very few things that are impossible. And as long as you don't have to break like any like laws of nature or anything, it's typically like doable. Even like the walking on water, 100 million or whatever. And actually, if you look at Angry Birds today, it's approaching 5 billion downloads, which is a lot. But I mean, there are people that done a lot more, so it's not like unheard of. But I think it's very, very important always, like whatever you do, you know, making games or whatever you do, that don't limit your like opportunity yourself. You know, it's I think very, very important, because we think that, oh, I can't do that or I can't do this. I mean, yes, you can. And I mean, if you think about like the Angry Birds story, I mean, it started with Niklas, Kim, and Jarno, 3 young guys, students, Aalto, boom, they made it happen. So it's like a student project. So if, you know, 3 young guys from Helsinki can do that, why couldn't like 3 young girls here in Belgrade do that? You know, no reason at all. So I think that that's always like important to keep in mind, that there's absolute no reason why you couldn't create like the next Angry Birds or next Supercell or whatever. So that's important. Anyway, so yeah, as I said, I mean, what we did then with Angry Birds, that and we had actually had that as kind of like our strategy. The point was that, okay, let's make games until we have a hit, and then let's take that hit everywhere, because we've done like 51 games before, so know that it's super difficult to make hit games. So then taking that game and actually taking that brand everywhere. So then when we expand into animation, we expand into consumer products, like everything, we're always told that, oh, but hey, you guys are like all over the map, you're a games company, you should focus. And then I always told everybody, we're very, very focused on providing Angry Birds branded experiences in all forms and shapes to our fans. Very focused on Angry Birds, not games, but on Angry Birds. And I think that this is something that I mean, for many companies, that you should kind of like understand, at least yourself understand the business you're in. I mean, if you define yourself as a games company, of course you do very different things than if you focus on like brand and like being in all areas of entertainment. And still remember, it was actually so I will always then explain this and like what we're doing, you know, like this focus on the brand. But then I remember when I was at this, I think it was Forbes or Fortune, one of these like events in the US. I was asked that, okay, so who's your competitor? And then I explained always, okay, so it's Disney. And, you know, because we wanted to position ourselves as, you know, being in all areas of entertainment, making games, movies, and everything. So Disney, always you should pick on like bigger guys. And so I said Disney, and then all of television. And they're like, what do you mean? And I said, and then I explained that it's actually, what I meant by that is that we're competing for people's time. And we all know that, you know, that's like what it's all about, that people have limited amount of time, and we want to kind of like maximize that. So basically, you know, making sure that you spend as much time with the Angry Birds brand as possible. You know, drink the soft drink, play the game, buy the T-shirt, funny hat, whatever, go to the park. And then I was super happy when, I think it was Forbes that did this article where then they actually had a long article about like, basically the theme was a little bit like, who do these guys think they are? And then they had this example that Disney is investing as much into their theme park outside of Shanghai, you know, in, I think it was like in a day, as Angry Birds guys make in a year. So, you know, like, who do they think they are? Disney is much bigger. So they didn't kind of like get the point that it wasn't about the size, but like, okay, being active in all the areas. And then they had done a very nice chart where they compared Angry Birds to all of television in the US. And they were saying that, okay, television, 50 hours, or I don't remember, some number like that, a month, or was it even, no, it must be like a week. Yeah, 50 hours a week. And then they had 50 hours for TV, and then Angry Birds, only 4 hours. You know, and then I was like, that's pretty good, because that means that we're bigger than any individual TV show. You know, way bigger. But it was like very nice to be compared, you know, that all of TV in the US. Not too bad. So I think that it's always good to remember and like pick on like big guys, like television. So that was one of the things that I was like super happy with, that we managed to do that. Yeah, then yeah, also, I mean, of course, not everything went like perfectly. I mean, when we expanded into consumer products, of course, we started with these plush toys that some of you might have seen. We sold millions of those. But then, being a startup and not too many people, of course, then actually one of our investors was Aydin Senkut. So he's like one of the super angels from Silicon Valley, and he actually got into Rovio and invested because his wife was a huge fan of the game. And then Aydin looked me up, and then I didn't know who he was, and we had this discussion. It's like this Turkish guy, Silicon Valley, and then it's like okay, and then okay, turns out that he was one of the first employees at Google, and so on, and then really great guy. And then so he invested, and then we're like getting into this like plush toy business. And then he said that, hey, you guys should like look into this Shopify company that I just invested in. So why don't you use Shopify to build your like shop, which we did. This was early days of Shopify. Okay, now Shopify is like huge. So we built our own shop. We actually set up our own warehouse, so we bought it as a service. So we did like everything ourselves. So some of you might recognize like this startup thing of doing everything, because we can and could. So we did that, and then we launched the first like plush toy like campaign and the store, like I think it was November, and then we had ordered tens of thousands of plush toys, and we were like ready to go, and then we just put an ad for the toys in the game, and then we sold out, I don't know, in a day or two. But then we didn't switch off the ad, so it was going, and then we got like overwhelmed, like so many orders. And then what happened was, of course, that plush toys you don't make like this, so they're like physical products. So then we started getting a lot of emails and calls and all that hey, I ordered this plush toy for my kids for Christmas. Where is it? And it's like nowhere. So of course we couldn't just like make those happen. So then what happened between Christmas and New Year that year? So remember, we hired 12 students from Aalto University that just to reply to every email, every call, everything, and it took until March the following year to clear the backlog. So we kind of like learned our lesson that okay, that you need to be like a bit careful. And but what was like a nice basically side effect of that is that we then ended up with like fantastic customer support. So we always got like amazing feedback that hey, how can you guys provide this level of support? You are selling like and back then premium games 99 cents, blah blah blah. So how can you do this? Like it's amazing. So we got like super good feedback, because we then like kind of like by mistake built up nice customer support because we had to. But one mistake leading to some like positive development. But yeah, anyway, so then what happened was that we also made Angry Birds into the fastest growing consumer brand ever. So in 2012, we were already in the top 10 of all licensed brands globally. So we were there were 7 Disney brands. So Mickey and Friends, Toy Story, Star Wars, all of these Disney brands in the top 10. So 7 Disney brands, and then Hello Kitty. So this middle-aged cat character by Sanrio. 40 years old nowadays or over, and then Peanuts, like been around since the 50s. So we actually got to that list in 2 years, and nobody else has done that like before or after. So it's like pretty cool. And actually also that meant that 93% of the Chinese population knew the brand, 91% in India, 9 out of 10 people on the planet knew the brand. And I mean, like endless stories to share about like where you could find the Angry Birds. I mean, one of my friends went to village like deep somewhere in the middle of nowhere in Mozambique, and then he walked into this village, and there's like nothing there, but there was like a small like store or a hut or something with a big like Coke sign, and then somebody had painted a big red bird like there as well. So 2 great red brands in that like little village, and then that's like cool because Coke obviously had paid for that, and one of our fans had painted a red bird there. So that's like how you do it. Good marketing is marketing that you don't have to pay for. So you need to have like fans, and that was actually what we always talked about at Rovio is fan experience. So not about like the customers or users or something, but fans and fan experience. Because when you do things like at the right level, then you deserve to talk about fans. That's like the kind of like engagement that you want to create. You want to have fans for what you do. And when you have fans, you can do anything. Anyway, so then, after getting, the brand there, we got the first movie out in 2016. We made that #1 in 52 countries, so US, China, everywhere. Sure, here as well. Haven't checked, but probably. Was pretty good. And actually, also with the movie, so we launched that the 20th of May. And because I have to add like China story here as well, because I typically I go to China like twice a month, and like easy being in Finland, we're the closest neighbor of China, Japan, India, and Europe. So 7 hours I'm in Beijing and all of that. So it's not like very long trip. But we also actually we opened the first office outside of Finland in Shanghai. So we didn't go to like the US or somewhere else, but we focused on China. And nowadays, Angry Birds has over 1 billion downloads in China alone. But anyway, so that was the first office that we opened. And also then with the movie. So we launched the movie. The premiere was the 20th of May 2016. And then early 2016 I had dinner or like a few drinks with Mr. Gao, Gao Shashun. I don't know if I pronounced that properly, but like he's a celebrity in China. He had his own talk show. He's a musician, chairman of Alibaba Music, I think nowadays. And then he did some drunk driving, which made him like really famous. But anyway, so I had dinner with him, and he's actually like lives in Beijing and LA. And then I told him that okay, we're gonna have the movie premiere the 20th of May. And he was like, what? Why did you pick 20th of May? That's like super bad date. That it's like still, like cold here. You should have picked Children's Day, which is in June, China, or like in LA and like in US. That all the big movies they come out for the summer, not like in May. I mean, why did you pick May? And then I looked at like Ga and said, hey, Ga, it's 520. Anybody know? You've been in China. Okay. Anyway, so 520 is the unofficial like Valentine's Day in China, because 520 sounds like 我爱你, I love you. So that's like China has this thing with numbers. The point I want to make here is that you have to understand the market, the culture, and these kind of things. So of course then that was the perfect day to launch a movie, the Valentine's Day in China. So of course it became #1 and all of that, and they made more than 100 million at the box office. So these are the kind of like little things that you need to learn, and you can only learn that if you actually go, in this case, to China, or like also we all think that we know, American culture because we all grew up with like American TV and movies and all of that stuff. But I mean, actually, we might not know as much as we think we do. So it's always you have to understand, and that's why I want to just like this 520 that if you're not Chinese, you don't understand like what is he talking about? But if you're Chinese, you immediately know. Actually, not all Chinese people who grew up like in US and all that, then I always get the opportunity to say that, are you actually like really Chinese? You don't even know. But anyway, so that kind of stuff. But yeah, so the movie became #1 in many places, and then I decided that it's like a good time to move on and do something else. So I actually then announced to the team that, okay, I'm going to actually stop being the mighty eagle here at Rovio, and I'm going to start focusing on bigger things. And I was like, okay, what could be bigger than Angry Birds? So then I said, okay, one thing that is slightly bigger is education. And education, actually, then I was like, okay, but is that like even a business? Actually, education is the second biggest business on the planet after food. It's 6.3 trillion, so not like billion, but trillion, so pretty big. And it's super inefficient. And, like coming from Finland, we have the best educational system on the planet. And we actually, unlike Asia and unlike a lot of the world, we have super short school days, not a lot of homework, fantastic results. And then I talk to my friends in China or in Singapore. Their school days are super long, and then you go to school like 6 in the morning, get home late in the evening, and then you do 4 hours of homework and repeat. Actually, places like Singapore, there's so much homework that the parents do the homework on behalf of the kids. And I'm like, so what's the point? And then I'm told, oh, Peter, you have to understand, they have to get to the next level. not like next level in game, but next level in school. Basically, the best school and like all of that, best university. So it's like crazy. And then you ask them that, okay, but if you have like only school and homework and everything, that like when do you actually like learn? And it's like, what do you mean? And then like learn to live and like do stuff. You don't. So basically, I think that one of the secrets to the success of the Finnish like gaming ecosystem. I mean, in Finland we're responsible for about 6% of the global mobile games business, which is pretty good for 5 million people. I think that one of the reasons is that we have fantastic education. Our educational system doesn't kill initiative, doesn't kill creativity. So we can do stuff like Linux and MySQL and Angry Birds and Nokia and Supercell and all of that stuff. So education is super important. And the way we do it is very different. Again, short school days, not a lot of homework, fantastic results. And that's what I'm working on right now. So decided that, okay, we're going to reduce the size of the global education market to say 3 trillion by making it more efficient. And then me and my friends will, we're modest Finnish people, so we'll capture only like 10%. And if you do the math, it's like 300 billion a year. So for the next 10 years, that's like my goal, and that's what I'm working on right now. So involved with several startups in education, everything from early years to kind of like student mobility to applying AI to education. And the plan is in 10 years get to like 300 billion a year. So it's going to take a bit of effort and time, but that's like the plan, and that's what I'm working on right now. And that's also why I'm here in Belgrade. So met with the education ministry and looking at how we're going to like transform education here in Serbia as well. So I'm working on that in China and Vietnam and in India. So been very Asia focused, but there's also my understanding, which is limited of Serbia. So as I said, it's first time here, but notice that we might be able to do something about making education better. But you can correct me if I'm wrong. So that's kind of like the plan. But yeah, so I could talk for like many hours. I was told that I could do like this for maybe 3 hours, and then I have to catch my flight. But I'm not going to talk for 3 hours, so sorry to disappoint you all. But I think that we'll switch to like interactive mode and fireside chat and all of that. So yeah, thank you for listening.
Please. Okay, thanks for this interesting presentation and many facts that we didn't know. Basically, my idea was we will have a question and answers now, but I would like to introduce the audience as well. So please get ready to ask some questions as well. There will be a girl with the microphone, so if there is a question already, please raise your hand and she can
Even
bring
though
it to
I
you.
would recommend that fantastic Finnish product, the catch box, but I'm sure we can use traditional microphone as well.
Yeah. Okay, so basically, Peter, you mentioned that you do a lot of stuff, but I would like to ask you, how would you introduce yourself in one sentence, if that's possible?
Oh, I'm an entrepreneur.
Entrepreneur?
Yeah,
okay,
that's it.
Nice.
Very easy.
Okay,
Yeah.
and it seems that there is a lot of enthusiasm in you still. So where do you find your motivation on a daily basis?
I think that I get easily like excited about like new stuff in general, so never been a problem. And then the way I kind of like decide or like get involved in stuff is very similar. I don't know if you read Malcolm Gladwell's Blink, but it's like all about like how making decisions based on your intuition is actually much better than doing it like super analytical. So and that's just how the brain works. So so again, I tend to decide like on the spot that okay, let's do this, and then yeah, I don't know. I've never had any difficulty to find motivation and inspiration. So and I also live by what I told Niklas and the guys back in early days of or before Rovio, that okay, that you should do what you love to do. So I basically stopped working many years ago. So I mean, if it feels like work, I'm not doing the right thing.
Yeah.
So I think that's like super important, and yeah, I mean it's and that's also like a why I use the very easy to describe what I am, that I'm an entrepreneur, and for me entrepreneurs are people who do things, and they are people who do things that they love to do, and you are getting stuff done. So it's that's what I do basically, and I've never been afraid of like getting into like new businesses or new like areas. So kind of my thinking is that like how difficult can it be? So
it's a great piece of advice. Thank you. Do we have a question already? Oh yeah. Okay, here. Please.
So just it kind of the question kind of relates to what you were just saying. So how difficult it really is to adapt since you worked on different stuff before and now?
I think that it's. I mean, I don't find it difficult, but I mean, I also tend to always think that everything is easy. So like it's. I think that it's like an attitude thing, but if you think everything is easy, it actually is. And then of course not everything. Kind of like when you do new stuff, more often than not you fail, because I mean that's like how the world works. But I think that then you always like learn from your like failures and your mistakes and all of that. So I think that then you just like move forward and do more. So it's and I don't think that it's that difficult to kind of like learn stuff, and when you're motivated and really like love what you do, then of course you can do anything.
Thanks.
Okay. So most of your lecture talk today was based on Angry Birds franchise.
Yeah, I figured that the mostly people from games. So yeah.
I'm good with that completely. Yeah. So there's this almost romantic story about 3 students back in 2003 participated in a mobile game development competition, creating this game that never was published under the name of King of the Cabbage World. So those.
It actually came out by kind of guys under Mole War name, and then we actually then we bought back the rights like when we were successful. So it's sitting there in like the Rovio museum or something. But yeah, it's always nice to close the loop. But
yeah. Okay. So and then those 3 guys became Rovio, and then
or actually like during journey. 2 of them left, and actually Niklas, only guy who kind of like saw the whole thing through, and he also left day to day like Rovio about a year ago. Yeah.
Okay, and then you created 51 game before the 52nd game was the success.
Yeah.
So where?
Yeah. But I think one thing that is also important. I mean, of course, then if you look at the 51 games before Angry Birds, so it's not like all of them were like complete failures. I mean, created this game and game series called Bounce, and Bounce was preloaded on 200 and some million Nokia devices. So
I know about Bounce.
Like, so like not too bad, but also what is important to remember that. Just like we have gone through like a lot of transformation. If you look at the games industry, I mean, like mobile, but also within mobile, that again free to play. But and Angry Birds time it was like premium, and then we went to free to play. But we also have to keep in mind that before the App Store, the games business was very different, and many of us might not remember, but it used to be that the operators, the handset makers, they controlled the world, and if you weren't on good terms with those guys, good luck. And now it seems like ancient history, but it used to be that the EAs and the game lofts were like the big guys, that they were actually every year when they reported their like success of the year, it was like this year we published 452 games. And it's like, what? But yeah, that was like the thing. They measured the success on how many games they managed to publish. And then you ask that, how many of those games were any good? Yeah. And then it's like none. But it didn't matter, because I remember actually GDC, so the Game Developers Conference, it was San Francisco that year, and I think this was like really early days. I think I was working at HP at the time. I was actually pretty much the only guy from HP going to the Game Developers Conference in the first place. But then we had these US operators or carriers, as they call themselves, and we had Sprint and Nextel was still around, and like a bunch of these guys. And then somebody asked that, okay, that like who actually, who decides about the games at Nextel, I think it was. And then this guy there said that, okay, that and he said that it's not like we need 50 poker games. We only need one good one. And then the question, of course, is that, okay, but who then decides what is a good poker game? And it's like, oh, it's me and then one of my colleagues half time. And then it's like, this is like what we used to have, like, next to us, and you are familiar with this system as well, called the Soviet Union. There, you didn't need like 27 brands of toothpaste. You only needed like one, and who cares if it was any good. So the case in games was exactly the same, that, the operators, the handset makers, they just like, okay, how many games can you deliver to us this year? Rovio, okay, yeah, we can give you 10 games. And if you're a small company, oh, you can only do 10. We're going to go to EA, they can give us 50 or 100. And then we'll like put that on our handset, and then we can have the bragging rights that, okay, buy this new Nokia phone, it comes with 50 crappy EA games. And then, people bought that because it has 50 great games.
Yeah.
Okay, not so great.
It was completely different mindset.
So I think that, that is important to remember. But yes, so we made some money, on like, okay, Nokia, you need a new game. They paid us for the development. And even if you had like let's say, a game that was installed on 200 million handsets, maybe they paid you 50K.
Yeah.
So not a good business. So of course, we all loved the App Store, because then all of a sudden, you didn't have to be good friends with all of these guys. It was actually the good game that mattered. So it changed the whole like business. And now it sounds like, oh, really? You had that kind of situation where some people decided on your behalf what game is a good game. So basically the 51 games were not all like super bad or anything like that, but they weren't like massive success stories, because you couldn't have massive success stories. Back then it was just like very different business.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying that. Okay, I think that we have another question.
Yeah, hello. What was the moment that you realized that Angry Birds is more than a game?
I think that we had kind of like decided that once we have a hit, we will make it more than a game. So kind of like once we realized that it was a hit, then we realized that it's more than a game. But and we made it so. I mean, also we could have just what happens many times when you have a hit, that then, okay, now we know how to do it, so let's make the next one. And we know many companies that have done that, and I mean that applies in movies and music and all of that. That there are many of these like one-hit wonders, and I think that you could also like say that, okay, Rovio and Angry Birds, that's like the only hit, but it's a bit more complicated than that. I think there's like, again, when you look at it as a brand, it's a totally different story. But then also I think if you look at the history of like Angry Birds and how the game like happened, actually Jaakko Iisalo, so one of the game developers at Rovio, he had been drawing these bird characters for many years, and then he was pitching this new game idea, and nobody really like got excited about the game and the game mechanic and all that, but everybody's like, hey, wow, we have to make a game around those birds. So the character like really resonated, and that is actually very different from, I mean, most games you build the game and the mechanic and all that, and then you kind of like have to come up with some characters to like make it work.
Yeah.
And this started with the characters, and then the game was built around those. So it was always about the character. And then like how do you know what character will like resonate and what characters people will love? And it's a little bit like, why do people love Hello Kitty? Because Sanrio has, I don't know how many hundreds of other characters, and you probably don't know any of them, but you know Hello Kitty. And it's like, oh, it's just this cat character, but for some reason, it works. And it's a little bit like with the red bird that, People
Yeah.
just like love that, and why? Okay, nobody knows, kind of thing.
Okay, so following that,
Mm-hmm.
you said previously that when Angry Birds came out and you realized it's going to be a success, you wanted to focus on Angry Birds branded experience for your users.
Yeah, for our
So
fans, but yeah.
for your fans.
Yeah.
Okay, so how do you create a brand? Where do you start? Where do you start exactly?
Yeah, I think that again, the way I always approach like branding and all that you need to create brands that create some kind of reaction, and I think that if you start now with Angry Birds, I mean, what is the first thing that you do when first time you hear Angry Birds? You ask why. Why are the birds angry? And once you ask that, stuck in your head forever. That's like how good brands work. And I think this is something that is very important, that if you have a brand that doesn't cause any kind of reaction and like all of that, then like good luck with that. And I think that it's super important. Also, now I always said that if you're serious about making games, you have to be serious about marketing out branding. And this is actually in any business. I mean, who cares if you make the best game on the planet or the best product on the planet if nobody knows about it? I mean, it's irrelevant. You have to make sure that everybody knows about it. So now when you look at the games market, and of course it's changed, and like free to play has changed everything, and like we'll see what happens next. But there are 700 new games hitting the App Store every day. So then first thing that you need to think about is that, okay, how do you stand out? How do you make sure that people notice your game and not one of the other 700 games that come out like today, or the hundreds of thousands of games that are already there? And this is also true, I mean, not only in games, it's true in like all markets, that there is an abundance of supply. There's lots of products. And it's the same thing, you walk into, like the local supermarket, and you typically don't, I'm going to go and buy a generic cola. Typically, okay, I'm going to go for a Coke or a Pepsi, like the brand is super important. And you need to think about like how you stand out. And then, also important that brand is not just, okay, some like visual representation or like what you do, but it's like the whole thing. It's who you are, what your company is. It's really like the whole story. And I think that this is also like super important. And then you have to live it. I mean, like, hey, it's not like coincidence that I'm wearing a red hoodie. I was wearing a red hoodie before Rovio, during Rovio, after Rovio. And that's actually how I made a point about like differentiation. I went to this event in Germany, early days of Angry Birds, and then there's, like some business event, and serious people, business attire. I'm on a panel, and they are wearing these dark suits and stuff. And then I just asked somebody to take a picture, went back to Rovio. Then Juhana Kotilainen, who was like in our marketing time, I showed him the picture that, okay, see this? And then it's like a couple of guys in dark suits, one guy in red hoodie, red shoes, done. Of course, he immediately understood that this is how you do it, like how you stand out, you like do things differently. And I think this is very, very important, that it's like personal level, everything you do in your company around like your brand, that, make sure that you stand out, that people remember you. I mean, the bazaar example that I used, other people doing these like super boring competence centers and whatever, and we did the bazaar and we won. And same thing, like with Angry Birds, that, the brand stands out. And always when you do brand, think about how to create a reaction. Also, like my title at Rovio, Mighty Eagle. Every single time, here's, my card, and then they read it, Mighty Eagle, what is this? And so you create a reaction. Always when people ask something or say something, you win. If they don't do anything, I know it's like business development or like some CXO, like whatever thing. I mean, that's super boring. There are like millions of those people around the world, so like who cares? Yeah.
Thank you, very interesting. Okay, I think that we have another question.
Hello. Sorry, I just decided to stand up. Anyway, my team and I are trying to create some creative game, and we are trying to focus on fun aspects as well.
Mm-hmm.
So which are more important, fun aspects or the creative aspects of the game? Because we are actually trying to make something different than the other games. So should we focus on fun aspects a lot, or maybe a bit less, so that the more creative aspects are more noticeable? That's all.
Yeah, I mean, let's say that the only like good answer I have there is that you should make fantastic games. You should make fantastic experiences, and then is it creative? Is it fun? I think that if it's not a fun or fantastic fun game, nobody will play it. So it's again, yeah, I don't know how any other way to kind of like answer that. That it always you have to build fantastic games. I mean, there's like no kind of like other way to win. And then it's a little bit like like always. You got this question like at Rovio and all that about innovation, and then I said like I don't even like understand why I should talk about innovation, because of course everything we do by definition is innovative. I mean, why would I do anything that is like not? So I think always when companies start talking about innovation, and many big companies talk about innovation, it's because they don't have any innovation going on and they like need to figure it out. So I think that a little bit there that of course if you make games, kind of like by definition what you do is creative. I mean, why would you? Okay, I'm gonna make a boring fun game. That already sounds like something that you can't. Okay, maybe that could be interesting, that this game is like really boring, and that could be our differentiator, but I'm not sure if it's a winning strategy. Huh?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it could be, yeah, true, yeah.
Okay, thank you. So, Peter, you told me before that you have checked out the report actually that
Yes.
was created by Serbian
Yeah.
Games Industry for
Yes.
2018. So, my question would be, what do you think about the local ecosystem for the gaming industry?
I mean, again, so as I already admitted, first time I'm here, so I'm not an expert by any means, but yeah, I think looked very impressive.
Based
And
on
I
the
mean, okay,
details.
and this is very impressive what I see here. So
Yeah.
like, so that's like very good start. But I think that then one thing. If I look at the ecosystem that we have in Finland and in Helsinki in particular, we have very, very high density of like game developers. We have the highest density of game developers, game studios, like anywhere in the world. I mean, there's no other place where you have that high density, and because of that, I mean, it's a little bit like you can stop like random person in a cafe in Helsinki, and then you ask him or her that, okay, please tell me about your game, and then they will start like, okay, it's like a match 3 RPG elements and blah blah blah, free to play and like all of that. So it's a little bit like in LA, you stop a random person and ask about their movie, and then they will start, oh, it starts like this. So I think that. So I think that this is again I was very impressed like reading the report that there seems to be pretty good density already of like games. So it's not, I mean, many places that I go, there's like one game studio and nothing else, and then like, okay, it's a bit difficult, but you can like clearly have a good ecosystem, and I'm not like that familiar with it yet, but I think that then one thing that because we have this high density in Helsinki, then it's not just like the game studios and like making the games, but you have the whole supporting infrastructure. So one thing that we have games education in like many of our universities. We have this like games executive program that the games industry and Aalto University put together. So we train people to run games companies. So I mean, this is again like just making games. Yes, fine, we know how to do that, but how do you run then your studio, your company when it comes a bit bigger? So I think that you need to have that. Then you also want to have all this like supporting like infrastructure, like people who can help you with your user acquisition and your analytics and like endless list. I mean, when we made Angry Birds, you probably could do like a matrix of like 4 like squares, and you need to do these things and you can create a successful game. Now it's probably like, I don't know, 16 things or 32 things, or like it's a lot more that you need to know how to do, and not everybody can know and be an expert in every area. So I think that games industry and business has become much more sophisticated, so you need to have in-depth like expertise in many areas, and you need to have, because of that, I believe that you need to have like high density, and you have to have enough people who know what they're doing. So again, looks like you have a very good start. And then one thing that again, not knowing enough here, but I think one reason why we have been very successful in Finland with games is that if I need to, I don't know, learn more about some monetization scheme, I can go and talk to the Supercell guys, or if I need to know about, I don't know, some specific thing, I can go to any of the studios, I can go and talk to any of the CEOs, any of the, you know, people who actually know, and they will share what they know. So it's very, very open, very connected.
It's pretty similar here.
Yeah,
I can tell you that.
So that's like, I think, very important, and also, I mean, like then, you know, from here it's like short flight to Helsinki, and if you need to talk to the Supercell guys, you can. So I think that that's something that is very, very important. But yeah, I mean,
okay.
what I see so far, very good.
Yeah, so I found this report for about Finnish gaming ecosystem from 2010. Actually, it was almost 10 years ago, and it showed details that are very similar to where Serbia is today.
Ah, okay, very good. Very good.
So it's like 10 years ago, it's okay now. You can ask Supercell how they're doing their user acquisition, and someone will help you with that. But back then, that wasn't the case because there wasn't something like that. So what should we do besides those things that you have mentioned to become like Finland in 10 years from now?
Well,
or
I mean,
in
we
shorter period of time?
we can work on that together. So I mean, that's one thing that we're happy to share, and like that's why I'm here. So so that's fine, and I think that I mean, you can always learn a lot from like others, and you should. And then, but then, of course, many times, you know, then to create like amazing success, that you have to do things like first, and I think that maybe one thing there is just like, don't be afraid of making that like super creative and super fun game, and you know, like doing things that haven't been done before. So you know, most of the times then when you try new things, as I said before, you will not be successful, but you will always learn something, and then, you know, the next time, and then before you know it, you have like the next Supercell, or, you know, Angry Birds, or whatever. So I think that that's kind of like very important for all the companies to create a culture like that, that people are not afraid of trying new things, not afraid of failing again, and then like being successful. So just like working on the kind of cultural side of things, that really making sure that stuff happens and it's like accepted.
Thank you. Okay, I think that we have another question.
Yeah, hi, it's Andrea. I'm from Input Hub Belgrade. I have a question, but we're kind of going back to the creative side again. I'm coming from a transmedia perspective, and as someone who came back from New York, I have a story. I have basically a character, and the situation I'm in is that every single stakeholder I'm talking to, right, sees it as a specific company, right? One thinks it's a merchandising kind of thing, and I should go to Asia right away, and it's enough. Right? The other one thinks it's a game, or it's an animation, and I should get an agent and go to Netflix, right? Coming from a transmedia perspective, my question is not when did you know it's more than a game. My question is how were you deciding what not to do? Because if we're talking about opportunities, that's easy, right? Okay, who offered the most, or who was the most friendly partner, right? But my question is, were you coming back to the story or to the core values, if I may pose a question like that?
Yeah, but I think that...
because this is, for example, I'm talking from my personal example. Like, this is where I am at the moment, and I don't want to be thinking, okay, who's offering the most?
No, but it's like, probably you should, or let's say that you should always like look at where you have traction. So it's again... it's always, let's say, like one thing that you shouldn't be or try to be smarter than the market. So I think that this is one thing that is always like good, that you know, if you can like, okay, let's plan now carefully that I'm gonna do this and this and this and all of that, and let's say that you decide that okay, I'm gonna do animation, but then if there's no traction and Netflix couldn't care less, or like whoever you go to, like then it's not it's not kind of like always a good idea to kind of like okay, you need to be agile and like go where you have traction. I mean, it's and then one thing maybe I would go back to you know, like okay, transmedia. It's like next you're probably gonna do VR or like some other like amazing thing. Like nobody cares if it's transmedia or VR, AR, whatever. I mean, it's about the experience. So then you should create a fantastic experience, and then it doesn't really matter if it's like animation or a game or like a piece of music or a movie or whatever. But I mean, it has to be like one of those things needs to be like an amazing experience. And I think that, I mean, if I look at take VR, which has been like hyped for a long time, and now people are realizing that okay, like it's going nowhere, or like not becoming huge like anytime soon. So I think that it's always dangerous when we start looking at things from like technology perspective, and we start looking that okay, I have this fantastic technology, you know, VR or whatever, and now you know I'm gonna make VR games. I mean, you should make fantastic games, and then maybe it's VR that is the medium, or maybe it's mobile, or maybe it's like a PC game or like whatever. But it's always like if you start doing things just for like technology's sake, or and I don't know anything about like your situation, but like then okay, I have this transmedia thing. Then it's like I have this mobile game, couldn't care less. I mean, like it has to be something that you know I want, and it's fantastic experience. I don't care what media or what technology. And this was always Rovio. Also, we always get asked that okay, you know, like if we're like a technology company, and say no, absolutely not. I mean, we use whatever technology needed to provide fantastic experience for our fans, but our fans don't care if it's, you know, like whatever technology. But if it's like a great game, they will play it, and it doesn't matter if it's like using the latest and greatest technology.
Yeah. Fair enough.
Makes sense. Thank you. We have another question here.
Hi, a couple of short questions. First, there are ups and downs in life and the game industry and the business. Of course, I think we got a good grasp about the success of Rovio. And could you share with us some of the hard parts of the journey and the down part? How did you, were the down parts present? How did you keep the motivation? What about the 51 games when talking about Rovio?
Yeah, and actually I'll give like a bit more like generic kind of like answer there on how I look at things, and I think that first of all there are always challenges, and I think that one thing that I like always personally looked at this, that you need to always learn from like mistakes and, you know, challenges and problems and all of that. But what I think is very important, and I always, you know, like, okay, could I share like biggest failures? And I say, yeah, I probably could, but the way I approach these things is always that, okay, fine, this didn't like go so well. I mean, I used to like the toy example, but it's actually like nice example because there's like good ending in that. But I think that what is also very important, that you learn from the mistakes, the failures, like quickly, and then you don't dwell in that, but you move on and you look forward and not backward. Because I mean, like again, you can't do anything about the past, but the future is cool because you can do whatever you like. You know, that's kind of like the thing. Because I think that it's really bad if you're like, okay, you know, I did this and it didn't, you know, work, and this probably not gonna work, and then it's like you get on this like, so I think that yeah, I mean, I hate like dwelling in this kind of like, okay, and this didn't work and this will not work, and you like you get into this like negativity, and that's like I can't deal with that.
So a gut feeling is good. Let's try it. And do you think, when talking about the future and the game market as it is today, would you go into it from zero right now, like if you would have to do it again, or do you think that there still is room for the creativity and the gut feeling at let's just do it in the so much data-driven, oversaturated, business-oriented market as it is today?
More than ever. I mean, if everybody else is just doing like super boring, just data-driven things, then all the experiences and monetization schemes will look the same. And I think that we kind of like have that right now. So so I think that, and then something like Pokemon Go happens, and many reasons why that was successful, but it's not what would come out of like, okay, let's create these like super effective monetization schemes for like free to play. So I think that there is definitely like room for doing things differently, and I think that if everybody else is doing something, don't do that. And I think it is a little bit like, I mean, if you're then competing with, let's say, take Supercell and King and like some of these very successful companies, you're not gonna have hundreds of millions to flow into like user acquisition like they have. So don't do that. Do something that is like different, and think about like how you can do something that will be different and have a bigger impact. So I think that it's I think that there's always room for doing new things and games. I mean, it's not like we've seen like the ultimate, like game and development and all of that. It's like the world is not ready, and it never will be. So there's always room. There's always opportunity, and I think that then if we're thinking that it's just me and my friend, or like whatever, and how can we compete with those guys who are like hundreds of people and hundreds of million and all that, and that's actually exactly why you can, because there are many things that you can do that those companies can't, because they have totally different structure and everything. So I would say that like best time to start your own like games company or other like startup is today, and yesterday probably would have been better, but today is fine as well.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, cool. So well, according to that, I believe that there is a chance for everyone, and there are many indie developers here who are not sure whether they should go like a self-publishing company or go with a publisher. And according to the report that we have just mentioned, there is 58% of them looking for a funding. So half of them are, so what's your opinion on that?
I think that it's very company and individual, like case by case, what you should do and what the right answer is. So it's not like, okay, go with a publisher. I mean, if you asked me before, I would always say that don't go with a publisher, that you want to kind of like control it yourself. But then it really depends on like what skill set and what you have in your team. And I really think that you need to look at it that way. But I think that my personal opinion is that you should try to do the publishing and all that yourself if you can, because it's also it's such a big part of the experience that if you can like delegate that, and it's like, okay, we just make games. But I mean, it's also like if you want to be successful, you need to really focus on making fantastic games, fantastic experiences, and then it's like the whole thing. And I think that many cases also, if you're an indie developer, I mean, the publishers are not like some kind of silver bullet that, okay, now publisher will like run with your game because they really love it. It's like, okay, many cases that, okay, let's try this game, oh, it didn't work, gone, and then nothing happens. So I think that there's no right or wrong answer. You need to figure it out. But my recommendation would be to go and try yourself, and you will learn. And then if you then learn that it didn't work, then you do something else with the next game. But I think that And I also, I mean, I realize if you're an indie developer, you know, it's not so easy. I mean, then you're like doing everything many times on a shoestring, and you don't have the funding, and you're like you're going to be dead tomorrow. So then, you know, like you need to then like do whatever you can. So it's I mean, I'm involved with like several game studios right now, and yeah, I know
You're
it's
familiar
not so
with
easy.
the situation.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So next question.
Nicola from Qualfa Games. Tonight you mentioned education and innovation several times.
Yep.
And actually that's your focus right now. So my question is how you see transformation of education next 10 years? And can we agree that, let's say, next 10 years, the most successful companies will be from education, actually?
I think that it's quite likely that many of the most successful companies will be connected to education, because it's just, I mean, as I mentioned, currently it's 6.3 trillion if you look at all of education. I mean, that's of course like then everything, like you know, all the media and all the schools and like everything. So it's like, you know, it's big. But already if you look at like many of the big companies, you take, you know, look at China, and they take education like very seriously. Many of the Chinese like unicorn companies are like education companies. So, you know, that's kind of a good indication already of what is going on and already happening. Then one thing that I think also, if you look at education, that it's very traditional, you know, and it's not very, there hasn't been like a lot of change if you look at education. I mean, there's this joke that, you know, a guy that gets transported into 100 years into the future, kind of like by mistake, and then he can't like recognize anything, everything is like changed. So what would be, you know, your advice to that guy? Is like, okay, find a school, it will be exactly the same. You know, and I think that is actually unfortunately like very true, that you know the school and like education hasn't really changed a lot if you look at you know, rest of the world. So I think there's big opportunity there. And one thing, if you look at what we need for efficient like education and for like learning, actually, if I again look at like how education in Finland works and all that, it's about learning, not teaching. And this is something that again that is helping the kids, helping all of us to learn. And I think this is something that's very important, that it's and then to learn you need engagement. Okay, what do you need in the best games? Engagement. So I really believe that if we bring the best game designers and the best pedagogues together, we can do amazing things. Because if you look at the current like, you know, world when it comes to games, I mean, there are many games coming out. So okay, first of all, you need to get the attention, but that's not good enough. I mean, you download the game, and because it's free, if you're not like pulled in immediately, and if you don't like the game immediately,
you'll give up. Yeah.
Gone.
Yeah.
And I think that if we can take this same, you know, the psychology of games, and we can make people addicted to learning, we win. So I think that if we can combine the best pedagogues and the best game designers, so we can create these like learning experiences that are as good as the best games, we win, and we can make fantastic education happen. And I think that this is something that's very difficult to do, but it's something that we have to do, because it's the same thing that, you know, about, you know, the competition for Angry Birds, you know, how people use their time. I mean, the same thing for like learning, that, you know, do I, you know, start playing a game, or like watch the latest show on Netflix, or like something like that, or do I like learn something? If we can make the learning like also engaging and inspiring like that, then again we win. So companies that figure that out, I think, have massive opportunity, and I think that we can do a lot when it comes to kind of like making learning fun and creating these kind of experiences. And I'm actually involved with some initiatives like that. So I really believe that we can make that happen.
Cool. You have just mentioned Netflix.
Yep.
So we have subscription in games recently announced. Apple Arcade,
Yep.
Google Stadia. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it's definitely happening, and I also like a bit of a involvement in that, because there's this Rovio spin-off called Hatch. I don't know if you come across that, but it's basically kind of like this super social Netflix for games and beyond is kind of like what they do, but they stream games. So you can basically download this Hatch client, and then you have all the games there, and it's streaming. And also technology-wise, they've been working on that for a couple of years. So it's very good experience, especially with 5G networks, and Docomo is deploying that in Japan, and they have Vodafone deploying it in the 5G markets in Europe. And that's also like subscription model. And I think that if you look at what happened with music, so again, it used to be about like iTunes and like downloading the songs, and of course now it's like Spotify, and it's Apple Music, and it's streaming, and nobody really even thinks about it, that why should I download like a song? It's like doesn't make any sense. And of course Netflix has done the same for movies and video, that it's again that's just how we consume music and video content nowadays. So I think that if you then look at that, there is no reason why interactive entertainment like games wouldn't go that same. And now with 5G, I think that is one of the big changes that is happening, that we get the latency to like next to nothing. So it's like a very interesting opportunity. So then when you have that, then I think subscription becomes very interesting, like we've seen with Spotify and Netflix and everything. So then it's again like a question about timing, and I think that this is one area where Europe Europe needs to get its act together when it comes to like getting 5G everywhere quickly. And because if you look at China will have all the big cities covered with 5G next year. So it's like there. Yeah. US is doing pretty well. We had some discussions this visit here also, and my recommendation was that the government here should just make sure that the operators deploy 5G like immediately, and not like try to make money on 5G licenses and stuff, because it's very short-sighted.
What did they say?
I think that we're kind of like we're gonna get there. Well, let's see. But again, we have we don't have 5G everywhere in Finland yet, but we have 5G available, commercial service, low cost works. So again, I think that the markets where again you have early access to 5G, you will see like lots of innovation, and people don't realize that 5G is a much bigger change than like 2G, 3G, 4G. That there's like some very cool things that we can start doing with 5G. So and the subscription and streaming, I think, will definitely have a much bigger presence with 5G.
Yeah,
so
agreed.
So we should like track that.
Agreed. Okay, we have another question, I think, too. Yeah.
I'm here with Mike. Ram is from Two Desperados. I have a question about branding. How you can measure success for your branding strategy if you are not so huge company and you if you don't have so high budget. What could be the some early indicator that you are on the good path when you define that strategy, for example?
Yeah, but I think that again, like it's about. It's not okay. You can start like measuring it, and like again, you can do that. But I think that it's like the simple things that your brand causes some kind of reaction, and people will actually remember it, so they can tell their friends. So I think that this is what I always ask about games and brands. That okay, what can I actually tell my friends about this? Because if it's some brand that I will immediately like forget, I'm not going to tell my friends. And if I can't tell my friends, it's not going to work online or anywhere, no matter what. It's just like broken from the beginning. And I mean, a lot of the things, if you look at Angry Birds, I mean, we had no social features or any of that like early days. And like, but it was just that the brand was so easy that, oh, have you checked out this like game, Angry Birds? And then it's like, why are the birds angry? And like all that. And it's, so it's, you have to think about that. And I mean, already, okay, Two Desperados. I think that I might remember that. So it's like a good start. So I think that you need to create those kind of things and build a story. So it's the brand is kind of like everything. So it's yes, you can measure everything, but I think that you it's again, I mean, yeah, of course you can, like coming from games, we can A/B test everything and like all of that, but I think that it's again there's no kind of like substitute for like a bit of creativity as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
So thank you. So another last question, please.
Yeah, my question would be, so startups and indie game developers that you are advising, when would you advise them to start thinking about developing a brand strategy?
Like immediately.
Okay.
That's what I always do, and I'm not like super happy with the branding of like all the companies I'm involved with. So I actually constantly nag about that, and but I think that also like then like you learn. So then typically like the companies realize that okay, maybe there's like a point in like making or putting a bit of effort into kind of like the branding and like everything. And I think that the thing is that I think the most important thing why you need to think about that like immediately, and it's not okay, let's just like come up with some random brand like and stick it on and hope for the best. It's again you want to have a brand that does something for you, because I mean if you're an indie developer, most of the time you don't have like unlimited marketing budget or anything like that, so you want the brand to actually create a reaction and do something for you, that it creates like a few downloads and like people will tell their friends and like all of that. So it's like you can't afford not to think about the brand. So I mean I think that the and even if you then like you start doing like okay, you successful and start doing like the paid UA massive scale and like all of that, I mean if you have a good brand, I mean your UA is also more effective. So I think that this is again that it's just I don't really see any reason why you would do like bad branding and like just not invest and not think about it, because it's like that's kind of like the difference between success and not being successful. So I would really think about that like from day one and yeah, I mean yeah, now.
Okay, thank you. So I would like to wrap up this conversation. So is there anything that you would like to say and you didn't mention already? Or is there any message to this audience, mainly from IT industry here in Serbia, gaming especially?
I don't think if I have like any kind of like specific kind of like message, but I think that I mean you're already doing like really well, so I think that there's a lot of activity, and then I think that yeah, maybe just like encourage everybody to kind of like share more and like talk more and like do that. So I think that and these kind of like events, just I'm more than happy to share like anything, answer any question. So again, and same goes for like games industry in Finland. So again, more than happy to share what we've learned, and we like mentioned 10 years ago that our report was similar to your report. So I don't think that we're like 10 years ahead or anything like that. But again, I mean we've done a lot of things, and more than happy to share. And then I didn't talk about like the most fantastic thing that happens in Finland every November, which is Slush.
Yeah.
So that's something that, of course, all of you should come to Slush and check it out. We had fantastic game-specific like day at Slush this year, and like I don't know, 1,000, 2,000 people from games industry that were there, and again like comparing notes and sharing. So I think that it's super important to kind of like talk to other people. I mean, typically they will help make your game, your idea, your brand, your whatever like better. So yeah, so hopefully I'll see you at Slush next year. So that's something I can highly recommend. And there's some question. I don't know if you still have time. Yeah. Yeah. So first of all, I mean, Slush is not a business; it's like a non-profit, but it has a bit of a budget. I think this year it's like 30 million euros, so it's not like a minor event. Yeah. So Slush, like really short version of the story. So Slush actually we started because in 2007 I gave a talk to 600 students at Aalto University about entrepreneurship and why it's okay to be an entrepreneur. So again, translated from Finnish, it's fantastic. But I mean, in Finland, like it's okay means that it's like fantastic. But yeah, so that was my topic. And then I asked the students during my talk that, okay, how many of you guys are going to start a company or join a startup once you graduate or even before? And in 2007, 600 are best students. Only 3 of 600 raised their hand that, okay, they'll join a startup, they create a company, which was, of course, complete disaster because my dinosaur story from the beginning that, you know, like, okay, if everybody wants to go and work for one of these big corporations like Nokia or and we all know what happened there. So, if you went there, maybe you ended up not having a job. So very risky to go and work for these big companies, much safer to do like a startup. But anyway, so yeah, so then basically we had to do something. And I mean, in Finland, we're only like a few people. So always when we have big problems, we have to like tackle them together. So then we decided to do something about this. Together with a few friends, we started Slush in 2008. First Slush, 300 people, so not much bigger than this. And then we had speakers. I invited Risto Siilasmaa, who started F-Secure, but okay, now better known for being the chairman of Nokia. Then Ilkka, who was running Digital Chocolate at the time, but again, as I said, now everybody knows Ilkka because of Supercell, but he was there sharing his experience of startups. And then I had Monty Videnius, who started MySQL, which was one of the first unicorns out of Finland, Sun Microsystems, 1 billion exit back in the day. And then I had Sampo Karjalainen, who started Sulake, Habbo Hotel. Nowadays Sampo is with Facebook, but anyway, he was there. And then we had Ilja Laurs, who started a company called GetJar in Vilnius, Lithuania. And GetJar, that was like the App Store before the App Store. Some of you might remember these jar files that you download to your phone and like all of that. So Ilja was there. And then just asked the guys to share like their experiences and why it's like cool to be an entrepreneur, why you should consider a startup career and all of that. I had Matt Marshall from VentureBeat, so founder of VentureBeat, was there because we wanted to get the message about like all the cool stuff happening in Finland, go back to Silicon Valley. And then actually first Slush with the 300 people, I told everybody there that, hey, this is going to become the biggest and best startup event on the planet. And then, of course, the reaction was that, hey, Peter, like, really? What about Silicon Valley? And then I, of course, said that, what about Silicon Valley? I mean, I worked at HP, original startup. I know my way around Silicon Valley. It's fantastic. But you can't lead by following. You have to kind of like create new things. And that's actually also why Slush is called Slush. That everybody else, and I'm sure all of you have been to these, like what I call wannabe Silicon Valley events, like Web Summit or whatever, that, you invite a few people from the US and then it's like almost like the Silicon Valley and, like great. And, I've been to Beijing and they will tell me that, okay, Beijing will be the Silicon Valley of China, or I go to, actually I was at one of these events in Beijing and I was told that, okay, Beijing, Silicon Valley of China. Then I flew to Hangzhou, home of Alibaba, and Jack Ma sings a song. And then the mayor of Hangzhou gets on stage and and then you already know, Hangzhou, Silicon Valley of China. And everybody wants to be Silicon Valley of this and that. And I don't know, I haven't heard this fortunately during this trip, but I'm sure that somebody will tell me that Belgrade will be, or Serbia will be the Silicon Valley of the Balkans or something. But anyway, so with Slush, it's when you come to Helsinki in November, cold, dark, slush on the ground, not the Silicon Valley. Better, and it's better because it's different. So and what makes actually Slush different is that it's from the beginning has been run by volunteers. So this year we had 25,000 people from 160 countries come to Slush. But the really cool thing is that we had 2,400 volunteers from 60 countries, more than 60 countries, including Serbia. So 2,400 young people that are there building the event, and they're there not because somebody told them to be there, but because they love to be there, they want to be there. And what happens with Slush is that those guys build Slush, run Slush, do everything for a year, 2, and after they build the best startup event on the planet, they go out and build the best startups on the planet. So you can like learn that, of course you can. And that's actually what Slush is all about. It's like a massive training program. And 5 years after we started Slush, I went back to Aalto University. Same presentation, same talk, same question that, okay, how many of you guys are going to, start a company or join a startup once you graduate or even before? And more than half raised their hand. So we did this like cultural revolution in Finland in like just 5 years. And if we can do it in Finland, you can do it in Serbia, like no problem. And the most important thing is that we put young people in charge. They run the event, and then we also created student-run like entrepreneurship clubs and societies, all the universities, student-run accelerators. So one of them called Startup Sauna. So it's again like that's also another branding story that I actually, now that I mentioned, have to share. So the guys actually started this student-run accelerator called the Aalto Venture Garage. And then I had a meeting with the guys, Christo and these guys who started, and said that, okay, guys, that what do you think will happen now when you have this Aalto Venture Garage? And let's say that TechCrunch, VentureBeat, Wall Street Journal, somebody, they're coming to meet you, and then you say that, okay, we have this student-run accelerator called the Aalto Venture Garage. What will happen? And I answered my own question, said nothing, because they heard millions of these like garage stories of, like this company, that thing started in a garage. I mean, that's like super boring. So, like don't do that, but, like let's call it Startup Sauna. And then what happened was that then they always presented to the media that, okay, we have this student-run accelerator called a Startup Sauna. And before they could continue, the media person, like, what? Are you pitching naked in there or what? And then we have to see it. And then they all went there, wrote the story, and then Startup Sauna became actually the best emerging like accelerator like that year. So again, branding, it's super important. Cool. But yeah, anyway, so with Slush, we then expanded that, so we're like Japan, China. And I think Slush is now the biggest startup like movement in China. We had 3 Slush events, Nanjing, Shenzhen, Shanghai this year. Shanghai, we had 15,000 people, but most important, we had 1,000 volunteers from like many countries that build Slush in Shanghai. So we're bringing that same like startup volunteering culture to China, which I think is like super important. So we are now, making China like more interesting as well. So it's but yeah, that's again like why you should come and check out Slush. And I know some of you have been there, and it's even if I say so myself, it's an amazing event. I mean, it really is. And the reason why it is and why we can like won compared to all these other events, everybody else is doing wanna be Silicon Valley. We want to be Silicon Valley of this and that, and we said that we're not the Silicon Valley. We're Slush. We're better.
Cool. So we should visit Slush definitely.
You should,
okay.
Absolutely. I mean, it's
Okay.
Promise you that it will be amazing. Yeah.
I trust you. Okay. Thank you, Peter, very much for your time.
Thank you.